Hello and welcome to Daily Life Stories for B2 Learners. I'm so glad you're here to start this journey with us. My goal is simple: to help you bridge the gap between textbook English and the real English that people speak every day. Have you ever had that feeling? You're listening to a native speaker, maybe in a movie or on a trip, and you feel like your brain is running a race it just can't win. You catch a word here, a word there, but the full meaning just flies right past you. It's a frustrating feeling, and every learner experiences it. But today, we start changing that. We're going to do it by sharing simple stories from my daily life, and we'll break them down together. Let's begin with a story I call The Quest for Coffee. It all started on a Tuesday morning. The alarm on my phone didn't just wake me up, it felt like it was pulling me from the bottom of the ocean. I felt incredibly groggy. That's a great word, by the way, groggy, groggy. It means you are sleepy and not fully awake. I'm sure you've felt that way before. So, I stumbled out of bed, my eyes only half open, and made my way to the kitchen. In my house, nothing truly begins until the coffee maker is on. It's the most important ritual of my day. I'm not a morning person by nature, so I really rely on that first cup of coffee to get my brain in gear. I reached for the bag of coffee beans on the counter, ready to grind them up. I love the smell of freshly ground coffee, it's one of my favorite small pleasures in life. But when I picked up the bag, it felt light. Dangerously light. I opened it and looked inside. Empty. Not a single bean. My heart sank a little. It might sound dramatic, but for someone who isn't a morning person, this is a small crisis. I had a full day of work ahead of me, full of meetings and deadlines. The thought of facing it all without caffeine made me feel a bit overwhelmed. I was already running on fumes, and the day hadn't even started. Let's pause on that idiom, to be running on fumes. Imagine a car that has almost no gasoline left. The engine is still working, but it could stop at any moment. When a person is running on fumes, it means they have very little energy left, but they are still continuing to function. So there I was, standing in my silent kitchen, feeling groggy and already running on fumes, with an empty coffee bag in my hand. My brain slowly started to work, trying to come up with a plan B. My first thought was my neighbor, Mrs. Gable. She's an elderly woman who lives next door, and she is the earliest riser I know. I often see her lights on before the sun is even up. She's a very kind soul, always ready with a smile and a friendly wave. I wondered if she might have some coffee to spare. It felt a bit awkward to ask, though. It's one thing to borrow a cup of sugar, but asking for coffee at 6:30 in the morning felt like a bigger imposition. An imposition is a request or demand that is not convenient for another person. I didn't want to be a bother. While I was weighing my options, my cat, Leo, started weaving between my legs, purring loudly. He always does this in the morning when he's hungry. It was his way of telling me, hey, I don't care about your coffee crisis, it's time for my breakfast. I looked down at him and sighed. At least one of us was going to have a good start to the day. I fed Leo, and as I watched him eat, an idea popped into my head. There was a small cafe, the Daily Grind, just a few blocks away from my apartment. It wasn't on my usual route to work, so I'd have to go out of my way, but the thought of a professionally made latte was suddenly very appealing. It would be a nice treat to kickstart the day. To kickstart something means to provide a burst of energy or a new impetus to get it started. You can kickstart a project, you can kickstart a car with a dead battery, and in my case, I needed to kickstart my day. The decision was made. I quickly got dressed, grabbed my wallet and keys, and headed out the door. The morning air was crisp and cool, a pleasant surprise. It was one of those early autumn days where you can feel the seasons changing. The leaves on the trees were just beginning to turn from green to shades of yellow and orange. As I walked, I started to feel a bit more awake. The grogginess was beginning to lift. Sometimes, a change of plans can be a good thing. My little morning crisis was turning into a pleasant morning walk. I decided to take the scenic route through the park. It would add a few extra minutes to my journey, but it was worth it. The park was quiet at this hour, peaceful. It was just me, a few dog walkers, and the sound of birds chirping in the trees. It was a much better start to the day than I had anticipated. As I walked through the park, I saw a man trying to train his puppy. It was a small, golden retriever, full of boundless energy. The puppy was supposed to be learning how to fetch, but it seemed to have its own ideas about the game. The man would throw the ball, and the puppy would run after it excitedly, but instead of bringing it back, it would start digging a hole or chasing a butterfly. The man looked a little exasperated, but he was also smiling. You could tell he adored his chaotic little dog. It reminded me of when I first got my cat, Leo. He was a handful as a kitten. A handful is a great informal word for someone, often a child or a pet, who is difficult to control. Leo was definitely a handful. He used to climb the curtains and knock things off my shelves. Now he's much calmer, but he still has his moments. Watching them made me think about the process of learning. It's not always a straight line, is it? You have a goal, like the man wanting his dog to fetch, but the path to get there is full of distractions and unexpected turns. It's the same with learning a language. You might want to have a perfect conversation, but you'll make mistakes, you'll forget words, you'll chase the occasional butterfly. And that's perfectly okay. The important thing is to keep showing up, to keep throwing the ball. I finally arrived at the daily grind. The smell of coffee and baked pastries hit me as soon as I opened the door. It was a warm, inviting aroma that instantly made me feel better. The cafe was cozy, with a few small wooden tables and some comfortable-looking armchairs in the corner. There was a barista behind the counter, a young woman with bright pink hair and a friendly smile. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" she asked cheerfully. Her energy was infectious. "Good morning," I replied, my own mood lifting. "Could I please have a large latte to go?" "You got it," she said. "Anything else?" I glanced at the display case full of croissants, muffins, and scones. The almond croissant looked particularly tempting. I hesitated for a moment. It was a bit of an indulgence. An indulgence is something that you allow yourself to have for pleasure, even if it's not strictly necessary. But then I thought, why not? My morning had started off on the wrong foot, so a little treat was in order. To be in order is a useful phrase. It means something is appropriate or suitable in a particular situation. For example, after a long week of work, a celebration is in order. In my case, after the coffee crisis, a croissant was definitely in order. "And an almond croissant, please," I added. "Excellent choice," the barista said with a nod of approval. "That will be $7.50. I paid with my card, and as she prepared my latte, I looked around the cafe. There were a couple of other people there. An older man was sitting in one of the armchairs, reading a newspaper and sipping a black coffee. Two students were at another table, laptops open, quietly discussing a project. It was a typical slice of life. That's an expression we use to describe a realistic representation of everyday experiences, a slice of life. The barista called my name and handed me the warm cup and the paper bag with my croissant. "Have a great day," she said. "You too," I replied, and I meant it. I stepped back out into the cool morning air, my mood completely transformed. I took a sip of the latte. It was perfect, rich, creamy, and just the right temperature. I felt the caffeine start to work its magic almost immediately. The fog in my brain finally cleared, and I felt ready to tackle the day. To tackle something means to confront or take on a challenge or problem with determination. I was ready to tackle my to-do list. As I walked towards my office, I took a bite of the almond croissant. It was flaky, buttery, and delicious. This was so much better than my usual quick coffee at home. It's funny how a small disruption to your routine can lead to a better experience. If I hadn't run out of coffee beans, I would have missed out on this lovely walk and this delicious breakfast. It's a good reminder that we shouldn't be afraid of small problems. Sometimes, they force us to be creative and push us towards new, unexpected pleasures. It's all about perspective. You can see an empty coffee bag as a crisis, or you can see it as an opportunity for a latte and a croissant. By the time I arrived at my office building, I was in a fantastic mood. I felt energized, positive, and ready for anything. I greeted the security guard at the front desk with a cheerful good morning and headed up to my floor. When I got to my desk, my colleague, Sarah, was already there, typing away at her computer. She looked up as I approached. "You're in a good mood this morning," she observed with a smile. "I am," I said, setting my latte down. My morning started with a minor disaster, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. A blessing in disguise is a wonderful idiom. It refers to something that seems bad or unlucky at first, but results in something good happening later. My coffee situation was a perfect example. It seemed like a bad thing, but it led to a much better start to my day. Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A minor disaster? Do tell." Do tell is a slightly old-fashioned but charming way to say "tell me more." You use it when you're curious to hear the details of a story. So, I recounted my morning adventure, the groggy awakening, the devastating discovery of the empty coffee bag, the brief consideration of bothering Mrs. Gable, and the eventual decision to venture out to the daily grind. As I told the story, I embellished it a little, making it more dramatic for comedic effect. To embellish means to add extra details to a story to make it more interesting or entertaining, even if those details aren't entirely true. I described my despair at the lack of coffee as if it were a scene from a tragic play. Sarah laughed. "I know that feeling all too well. I can't function without my morning tea. If I run out, my family knows to stay out of my way." It's comforting to know you're not alone in your little quirks, isn't it? We all have these small rituals that help us navigate our days. The rest of the morning was busy, but productive. The positive energy from my walk and the excellent coffee seemed to carry me through my tasks. I had a meeting with a client that went surprisingly well. Usually, this client can be quite demanding and hard to please, but today, we were on the same wavelength. To be on the same wavelength is another great idiom. It means that two or more people are thinking in a similar way and understand each other well. We agreed on all the major points of the project, and the meeting ended ahead of schedule, which is always a bonus. During my lunch break, I decided to take another short walk outside. The weather was too nice to stay indoors. As I was walking, I passed by a small bookstore. I'm a complete bookworm, so I can rarely resist the temptation to go inside, even if it's just for a few minutes. A bookworm is a person who loves to read. The store was quiet and smelled of old paper and ink, a scent that I find incredibly comforting. I browsed the shelves, letting my fingers trail along the spines of the books. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, I was just enjoying the act of being surrounded by stories. Then, a book with a bright yellow cover caught my eye. The title was The Art of a Good Day. It seemed fitting, given the way my own day had turned out. I picked it up and read the back cover. It was about finding joy and meaning in the small, everyday moments of life. It felt like the universe was sending me a message. Without a second thought, I took the book to the counter and bought it. It felt like the perfect souvenir for my unexpectedly good day. I knew it was an impulse buy, but I didn't care. An impulse buy is something you purchase without planning to, simply because you see it and want it at that moment. Sometimes, the best purchases are the ones you don't overthink. I spent the rest of my lunch break sitting on a park bench, reading the first chapter of my new book. The author wrote about how our perception of a day is often shaped by the very first hour after we wake up. A positive start, he argued, can create a ripple effect that influences everything that follows. A ripple effect is a situation in which one event causes a series of other events to happen. My morning was a perfect illustration of this idea. The negative start of having no coffee was quickly replaced by the positive experience of the walk and the cafe, and that positivity rippled through my entire morning. When I returned to the office, I felt refreshed and mentally clear. The afternoon slump, that period of tiredness many people feel after lunch, never hit me. I managed to finish a report that I had been putting off for days. To put something off means to delay or postpone it. We all have tasks we put off because they are boring or difficult. But today, I had the focus and energy to get it done. As the workday was winding down, Sarah stopped by my desk again. "So," she said, leaning against the partition. "Did the rest of your day live up to the promise of that fancy latte?" "It really did," I smiled. "It's been one of the most productive days I've had in a while. And it all started with a tiny domestic crisis." "Maybe you should run out of coffee more often," she joked. "Maybe I should," I laughed. "Or maybe I should just remember to appreciate the small detours in life." After work, I headed home, but I made one important stop along the way, the supermarket. I was not going to make the same mistake twice. I bought a large bag of my favorite coffee beans, enough to last me for at least a couple of weeks. As I put the bag in my shopping cart, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I was prepared. When I got home, the first thing I did was fill up the coffee grinder. The sound of the beans being ground was music to my ears. My routine was restored. But something had shifted in my perspective. The routine felt less like a necessity and more like a choice. That evening, I settled onto my sofa with a cup of tea. I never drink coffee at night if I want to sleep, and my new book, The Art of a Good Day. Leo, my cat, jumped up and curled into a ball on my lap, purring contentedly. The apartment was quiet, and I felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. As I read, I thought about how I would tell this story. It was a simple story, with no grand drama or earth-shattering events. But that's what daily life is mostly made of, isn't it? It's a collection of small moments, minor problems, and simple pleasures. And these are the moments where real language lives. When you're learning English, it's easy to focus on big topics like politics, science, or history. But you're far more likely to need to talk about running out of coffee, buying a book, or what your colleague said at work. Mastering the vocabulary and idioms for these everyday situations is what will make you feel truly fluent. It's what helps you connect with people on a personal level. Think about the phrases we've looked at today: groggy, running on fumes, a blessing in disguise, on the same wavelength, a handful, an impulse buy, to put something off, and a ripple effect. These aren't phrases you'll find in a formal business report, but you will hear them in conversations with friends, in movies, and on TV shows. They add color and personality to your speech. They are the building blocks of natural, confident English. Let's do a quick review. Can you remember what groggy means? It's that sleepy, not fully awake feeling. And what about a blessing in disguise? That's something that seems bad at first but has a good outcome. Try to use one of these phrases yourself this week. Maybe you'll have a morning where you feel groggy. Or maybe a small problem will turn out to be a blessing in disguise. Using the language is the only way to truly own it. My little coffee adventure was a perfect reminder of that. It wasn't just about getting my caffeine fix. It was about turning a negative into a positive, embracing a small change in routine, and finding joy in the unexpected. It gave me a story to tell, and now, it has given me a story to share with you. And that brings us to the end of our first story, The Quest for Coffee. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned a few new things along the way. The key is not just to listen, but to engage with the story. Think about it. Relate it to your own life. And most importantly, be curious about the language. Now, let's move on to a different kind of day. This next story is about something that happens to all of us from time to time, getting hopelessly lost. It's a story about a trip I took a few months ago with my friend, Alex. Alex is one of my oldest friends. We've known each other since university. He's a very adventurous person, always looking for the next mountain to climb or the next trail to hike. I'm a bit more of a homebody, but he has a way of talking me into his adventures. To talk someone into something means to persuade them to do it, even if they are initially reluctant. So, Alex talked me into a weekend hiking trip in a national park a few hours away from the city. He promised me breathtaking views and a chance to disconnect from technology and reconnect with nature. It sounded like a good idea at the time. We set off early on a Saturday morning. Alex was driving, and I was in charge of navigation. That was my first mistake. I'm notoriously bad with directions. I have a terrible sense of direction. We say a sense of direction to describe a person's natural ability to know where they are and find their way. My sense of direction is, to put it mildly, non-existent. I had the map on my phone, but the park was vast, and the mobile signal was patchy. Patchy is a good word to describe something that is inconsistent or uneven. A patchy signal means it works in some places but not in others. We were looking for a specific trailhead, the starting point of a hiking path, called Eagles Peak. According to Alex, it was supposed to have the most spectacular views in the entire park. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. We were driving on a well-paved main road, and the signs were clear. But then, the navigation app told me to turn onto a smaller, unpaved road. It looked more like a dirt track than a road. "Are you sure about this?" Alex asked, slowing the car down. He sounded skeptical. "The app says this is the way," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. So, we turned onto the dirt road. It was bumpy and much narrower than the main road. Trees and bushes crowded in on both sides, their branches scraping against the car. After about 15 minutes of this, the road split into two identical-looking paths. The navigation app on my phone suddenly went blank. The patchy signal had given up on us completely. We had lost our connection. We were officially off the grid. Off the grid is an expression that means you are not connected to public utilities, especially the electricity supply, but we also use it more broadly to mean not connected to the internet or mobile networks. "Okay," Alex said, stopping the car. "Left or right?" I stared at the two paths, trying to see if one looked more official than the other. They both looked equally uninviting. I had a 50-50 chance of being right, but I had a gut feeling that this was a critical moment. A gut feeling is an intuition or an instinct, a feeling you have that you can't fully explain with logic. My gut feeling was telling me that we were in a bit of a pickle. To be in a pickle is a funny, informal idiom that means to be in a difficult or awkward situation. We were definitely in a pickle. "I have no idea," I admitted, defeated. "The app is dead." "I'm so sorry, Alex." Alex didn't get annoyed. That's one of the things I appreciate about him. He's very level-headed, which means he is calm and able to make sensible decisions in difficult situations. "It's not your fault," he said. "The signal is terrible out here. Let's just take a guess. The path on the right looks slightly more worn. Let's try that one." So, we drove down the right-hand path. The road got progressively worse. It became rockier and steeper. We were both silent, a sense of unease growing in the car. After another 10 minutes, the path ended abruptly in a small, circular clearing. It was a dead end. A dead end is a road or path that is closed at one end. It has no exit. We had literally hit a dead end. Alex let out a long sigh and turned off the engine. "Well, this isn't the Eagles Peak trailhead." We got out of the car. The clearing was surrounded by dense forest. It was eerily quiet. You couldn't hear any traffic, just the sound of the wind in the trees and a few distant bird calls. For a moment, it was peaceful. But then, the reality of our situation set in. We were lost in the middle of a huge national park with no map and no signal. "Okay, Plan B," Alex said, ever the optimist. We backtrack. To backtrack means to go back along the same route that you have just come. It was our only logical option. So, we got back in the car, and Alex carefully turned it around. We started driving back the way we came. But now, everything looked different. The path that had seemed straightforward on the way in now seemed confusing. Every small turn and fork in the road made us second-guess ourselves. To second-guess yourself means to doubt or question a decision you have already made. I was second-guessing my entire existence as a navigator at that point. We drove for what felt like an eternity. The sun was higher in the sky now, and shadows were playing tricks on our eyes. Every path looked like the one we had come down. Panic started to bubble up inside me. It was a slow, creeping feeling. I imagined us running out of gas, stranded in the middle of nowhere. My mind was jumping to the worst-case scenario. To jump to the worst-case scenario means to immediately imagine the most terrible possible outcome of a situation. It's a common reaction when you're feeling anxious or scared. Alex, however, remained calm. He was focused, his hands steady on the steering wheel. "Don't worry," he said, sensing my anxiety. "We're not in any real danger. We have a full tank of gas, plenty of water, and food. The worst that can happen is that we waste a few hours of our day. We just need to keep a cool head." To keep a cool head is the opposite of panicking. It means to stay calm in a difficult situation. Alex's composure was reassuring. Composure means the state of being calm and in control of your own feelings. His calmness helped me to get a grip on my own fear. To get a grip on your emotions means to take control of them. Finally, after another 20 minutes of tense driving, we saw something that looked familiar, a large, distinctively shaped oak tree that we had both noticed on our way in. A wave of relief washed over me. We were back on the right track. Soon after, we reached the fork in the road where we had made the wrong turn. This time, we took the left path. It was just as bumpy and narrow, but after a few minutes, we saw a small, wooden sign peeking out from behind a bush. It was almost hidden. I rolled down my window and leaned out to get a better look. In faded letters, it read Eagles Peak Trailhead. We both burst out laughing. It was a laugh of pure relief and absurdity. The sign was so poorly placed, it was almost comical. We had been so close all along. We parked the car in the small, designated lot. There were only 2 other cars there. We had found it. We were finally at our starting point, almost 2 hours later than we had planned. "Well," Alex said, stretching his arms after the long drive. "That was an adventure before the adventure even started." He was right. The stress of being lost had already made the trip memorable. We got our backpacks from the trunk, laced up our hiking boots, and looked at the path ahead. The real hike was about to begin, but it felt like we had already overcome the biggest challenge of the day. The trail itself was beautiful. It wound its way up the mountain through a forest of tall pine trees. The air was clean and smelled of pine needles and damp earth. The path was steep in places, and my leg muscles, unaccustomed to this kind of exercise, started to burn. But the feeling of being out in nature, away from the noise and rush of the city, was invigorating. Invigorating is a wonderful word that means making you feel strong, healthy, and full of energy. Alex, being an experienced hiker, was in his element. He pointed out different types of birds and plants, and he knew how to read the trail. I was just trying to keep up with him. To be in your element means to be in a situation where you are happy and comfortable because you are good at it. Hiking was definitely Alex's element. After about an hour of steady climbing, we came to a clearing that offered our first real view. We could see the valley below us, a patchwork of green fields and forests. A patchwork is a collection of different pieces, like a quilt made of many small squares of fabric. The view looked like a beautiful, green patchwork quilt. It was breathtaking. We stopped for a few minutes to drink some water and take it all in. To take something in can mean many things, but in this context, it means to spend time looking at something and absorbing its beauty or details. As we continued our ascent, the trail became more challenging. It was rockier and required more concentration. At one point, we had to scramble over a large formation of boulders. To scramble means to move quickly and awkwardly, often using your hands to help you climb. It wasn't elegant, but it was effective. I was starting to feel tired. My breathing was heavy, and I had to stop every few minutes to catch my breath. To catch your breath means to rest for a moment after strenuous physical activity until you can breathe normally again. Alex was very patient. He never made me feel like I was slowing him down. "We're almost there," he encouraged me. "The view from the top is worth every step." "I promise." His encouragement kept me going. It's amazing how much of a difference a few kind words can make when you're struggling. It can give you the push you need to keep moving forward. Finally, we saw it. The trees thinned out, and the path opened up onto a wide, rocky summit. We had reached Eagle's Peak. And Alex was right. The view was absolutely spectacular. It was a 360-degree panorama of the entire national park. We could see mountains rolling into the distance, a sparkling lake in a far-off valley, and the vast blue sky above. It felt like we were on top of the world. We both stood there in silence for a few minutes, completely in awe of the landscape. To be in awe of something is to be filled with a feeling of wonder and respect. The view was so grand and majestic that it made our earlier troubles, getting lost, the bumpy road, the poorly placed sign, seem completely insignificant. "See?" Alex said, finally breaking the silence. "Worth it, right?" "Absolutely," I replied, unable to take my eyes off the horizon. "This is incredible." We found a flat rock to sit on and unpacked our lunch. We had simple sandwiches, apples, and a flask of hot tea. A flask is a type of container used to keep drinks hot or cold. The hot tea was especially welcome after the long, strenuous hike. Everything tastes better outdoors, don't you think? That simple sandwich, eaten on top of a mountain with that stunning view, felt like a gourmet meal. We sat there for almost an hour, eating, talking, and just enjoying the profound sense of peace. It was a moment of pure bliss. Bliss is a state of perfect happiness. There was no phone signal, no emails to check, no deadlines to worry about. It was just us, the mountain, and the sky. It was a powerful reminder of the importance of disconnecting from our busy lives and immersing ourselves in the natural world. The hike back down was much easier, of course. Gravity was on our side. We were in high spirits, chatting and laughing, recounting our morning misadventure. The story that had been stressful to live through was now a funny anecdote. An anecdote is a short, amusing story about a real incident or person. Our story of getting lost had become our favorite anecdote from the trip. When we got back to the car, we were exhausted but happy. It was the best kind of tired, the kind you feel after a day of physical exertion and accomplishment. On the drive home, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I thought about the day. It was a day of contrasts, the frustration of being lost and the joy of being found, the physical struggle of the hike and the mental peace of the summit. It taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the most rewarding experiences are the ones that you have to work for. The view from Eagle's Peak was beautiful, but it was made even more meaningful by the difficult journey it took to get there. The struggle was part of the story. It gave the destination its value. And that's a good metaphor for learning a language, too. It's a long, challenging journey. There will be times when you feel lost, frustrated, and want to give up. But every new word you learn, every conversation you have, is a step up the mountain. And when you finally reach those moments of fluency, when you can express yourself effortlessly, the view from the top is absolutely worth it. That hiking trip with Alex has become one of my fondest memories. A fond memory is a memory that you remember with happiness and affection. It's funny because, at the time, I was so stressed and convinced we were in for a disaster. But now, I wouldn't change a thing about it. The story is so much better because we got lost. This brings me to our next story, which is about a completely different kind of challenge, a social one. This is a story about facing a fear that many people share, public speaking. A few years ago, I was asked to give a presentation at a conference. It was a big deal for my career. The conference was a major event in my industry, and there would be hundreds of people in the audience, including some very influential figures. Now, I should tell you that I am not a natural public speaker. In fact, I used to be terrified of it. Just the thought of standing on a stage with everyone's eyes on me would make my palms sweat and my heart race. I had a genuine phobia. When my boss asked me to do the presentation, my first instinct was to say no. I wanted to come up with an excuse, any excuse, to get out of it. To get out of something means to avoid doing something that you are supposed to do or that you don't want to do. But a part of me knew that this was a huge opportunity. It was a chance to share my work, to make a name for myself, and to step out of my comfort zone. To step out of your comfort zone means to do things that you don't feel comfortable with, usually to challenge yourself and grow as a person. So, with a great deal of trepidation, I said yes. Trepidation is a feeling of fear or anxiety about something that may happen. I was full of trepidation. I had 2 months to prepare. I knew that the only way I could get through this was to be overprepared. I spent weeks working on my presentation. I researched my topic exhaustively. I created slides that were clear, concise, and visually appealing. I wrote a script and then I practiced it. I practiced it over and over again. I practiced in front of a mirror. I recorded myself on my phone and watched it back, cringing at my own awkwardness. To cringe means to feel embarrassed or awkward. I practiced in front of my cat, Leo, who is a very patient, if uncritical, audience. Then, I asked my friend Sarah and a few other colleagues if I could do a trial run for them. A trial run is a practice of an event or performance to see how it will work in reality. They agreed, and we booked a meeting room. That trial run was a turning point. A turning point is a time at which a decisive change in a situation occurs, especially one with beneficial results. Standing in front of a small, friendly audience of 4 people was still nerve-wracking, but it was manageable. Nerve-wracking is an adjective we use to describe something that is difficult to do and causes a lot of worry or anxiety. After I finished my presentation, my colleagues gave me feedback. They told me what worked well and what could be improved. Their feedback was constructive and incredibly helpful. Constructive feedback is advice that is useful and intended to help or improve something. They pointed out that I was speaking a little too fast and that I was fidgeting with my hands. To fidget means to make small, nervous movements with your hands or feet. They also gave me a lot of encouragement. The content is brilliant, Sarah said. You just need to believe in it. You know this topic inside and out. To know something inside and out is an idiom that means to know it completely and thoroughly. Her words gave me a much-needed confidence boost. In the final weeks leading up to the conference, I focused on their feedback. I practiced slowing down my speech. I found a place to rest my hands on the lectern, the stand where a speaker places their notes, so I wouldn't fidget. I worked on making more eye contact with my imaginary audience in the mirror. The day of the conference arrived. I flew to a different city, checked into my hotel, and tried to get a good night's sleep, which was easier said than done. Easier said than done is a very common expression. It means that something sounds like a good idea, but it is difficult to actually do. The next morning, I put on my smartest professional outfit, trying to look the part of a confident expert. To look the part means to have an appearance that is suitable for a particular role. I hoped that if I looked confident, I might start to feel confident. I went to the conference center. It was a huge, bustling place, full of people networking and chatting. The scale of it was intimidating. I found the main hall where I would be speaking. It was enormous. The empty chairs seemed to stretch on forever. My presentation was scheduled for after the lunch break. I spent the morning trying to listen to other speakers, but I couldn't concentrate. My own presentation was looming over me. To loom over someone means that a problem or a worry is on their mind and causing them to feel anxious. My fear was definitely looming over me. As my scheduled time slot drew nearer, the familiar feelings of panic began to set in. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt a knot in my stomach. A knot in your stomach is a tight, uncomfortable feeling you get when you are nervous or worried. I found a quiet corner in the hallway and tried to do some deep breathing exercises. I remembered a piece of advice I had read: don't fight the anxiety, acknowledge it. The adrenaline, the hormone that your body produces when you are scared or excited, can actually be channeled into positive energy. I tried to reframe my fear as excitement. To reframe something means to change the way you think about or express it. I wasn't scared, I was excited to share my work. A few minutes before I was due to go on stage, one of the event organizers came to find me. She was a calm, professional woman who gave me a warm smile. "We're ready for you," she said. Break a leg. Break a leg is a classic idiom in the world of performance. It's a strange-sounding phrase, but it means good luck. It's considered bad luck to say good luck to an actor or performer, so people say break a leg instead. I walked towards the stage. The hall was full now. Hundreds of faces were looking in my direction. The stage lights felt hot and blindingly bright. For a terrifying second, my mind went completely blank. I couldn't remember my opening line. I couldn't remember my own name. It was my worst nightmare coming true. I took a deep breath, walked up to the lectern, and gripped its sides. I looked out at the audience, found a friendly-looking face in the second row, and made eye contact. And then, I just started. I opened my mouth, and the words that I had practiced hundreds of times began to come out. My voice was a little shaky at first, but as I got into the flow of my introduction, it became stronger. To get into the flow of something means to become fully immersed and focused on an activity. Once I was in the flow, the outside world started to fade away. It was just me and my topic. I remembered to pause. I remembered to breathe. I remembered to look at different sections of the audience. I even managed to crack a small joke, and a few people laughed. That small ripple of laughter was incredibly encouraging. It broke the tension and made the whole experience feel more like a conversation than a formal speech. Before I knew it, I was on my final slide. I delivered my concluding remarks and said, "Thank you. Are there any questions?" A wave of applause filled the hall. It was a surreal moment. Surreal is an adjective we use to describe something that feels very strange, almost like a dream. The feeling of relief was immense. I had done it. I had faced my biggest fear and survived. Several people raised their hands to ask questions. I was nervous about this part, the unscripted part. I was worried I wouldn't know the answers or that I would stumble over my words. To stumble over your words means to speak in a hesitant or clumsy way, making mistakes and pausing. The first question was a challenging one, asking for my opinion on a controversial new development in our field. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. I started my answer by saying, "That's a great question," which is a useful technique that gives you a few extra seconds to think. I answered the question as best I could, drawing on the extensive research I had done. I found that the knowledge was all there, stored in my brain. I just needed to trust myself to access it. The question and answer session went much better than I had feared. The audience was engaged and interested, and their questions were thoughtful. When the session was over, a number of people came up to the stage to speak with me. They congratulated me on the presentation and wanted to discuss my work further. One woman, a senior figure from a well-respected company, gave me her business card and said, "That was a fantastic presentation. Very insightful. I'd love to follow up with you about this." To follow up with someone means to contact them later to continue a conversation or to take further action. Her validation meant the world to me. Validation is the feeling that you get when other people approve of you or recognize your worth and abilities. I walked away from that stage feeling like a different person. I was buzzing with a mixture of adrenaline and pride. To be buzzing with an emotion means to be full of it. The fear that had controlled me for so long had been replaced by a powerful sense of accomplishment. That experience taught me a profound lesson about fear. Fear is not a wall, it's a hurdle. A hurdle is a barrier or an obstacle that you have to jump over. You can't always get rid of fear, but you can learn how to jump over it. And the way to do that, I discovered, is through preparation and practice. My fear of public speaking didn't vanish overnight. I still get nervous before a presentation. But now, I know how to manage it. I have a process. I have a set of tools, like over-preparing, doing a trial run, and reframing my anxiety, that I can rely on. I proved to myself that I could do it, and that knowledge is something that no one can ever take away from me. The confidence I gained from that conference experience started to spill over into other areas of my life. To spill over means that an effect or a feeling starts to affect another situation or group of people. I found myself speaking up more in meetings at work. I was less hesitant to share my ideas, even if they were not fully formed. I was more willing to take on new challenges that would have previously intimidated me. This brings me to my next story, which is about a different kind of challenge, one that involves creativity and the courage to try something new. This is the story of how I learned to cook. For most of my adult life, I was not a cook. My kitchen skills were, to put it charitably, very limited. To put it charitably is a phrase you use when you are trying to describe something bad in the kindest way possible. My culinary repertoire consisted of about 3 dishes: pasta with sauce from a jar, scrambled eggs, and toast. Anything more complicated than that felt like a daunting scientific experiment. Daunting means seeming difficult to deal with in anticipation, intimidating. I relied heavily on takeout and pre-packaged meals. It was convenient, but it was also expensive and not very healthy. I would often look at cookbooks or watch cooking shows on TV with a sense of admiration and mystery. The chefs made it look so effortless, so intuitive. For me, a kitchen was a place of potential disaster. The turning point came when I moved into a new apartment. This apartment had a wonderful kitchen. It was spacious, with a lot of counter space and great natural light. It seemed like a waste to just use it for making toast and storing takeout containers. It was a kitchen that was begging to be used. So, I made a resolution. A resolution is a firm decision to do or not to do something. My resolution was to learn how to cook one new dish every week for a year. I decided to start with the basics. I bought a couple of highly recommended beginners' cookbooks. I also found a few food blogs and YouTube channels that were aimed at novice cooks. A novice is a person who is new to and inexperienced in a job or situation. I was a complete novice. My first attempt was a simple roast chicken. The recipe seemed straightforward enough. Straightforward means uncomplicated and easy to do or understand. I bought all the ingredients, read the instructions about 10 times, and got to work. It was a clumsy process. I wasn't sure how to properly prepare the chicken. I struggled to chop the vegetables into uniform pieces. I got spices all over the counter. The kitchen quickly became a mess. But I was determined to see it through. To see something through means to continue doing it until it is finished. I put the chicken in the oven, set the timer, and hoped for the best. To hope for the best is an expression that means to hope that a situation will have a good outcome, especially when you have no control over it. While the chicken was roasting, I tried to clean up my chaotic kitchen. I felt a little discouraged. It was so much harder than it looked on TV. When the timer finally went off, I nervously took the chicken out of the oven. It didn't look quite like the picture in the cookbook. The skin wasn't as golden and crispy as I had hoped. Some of the vegetables looked a little burnt. But it smelled amazing. I carved a slice of the chicken and took a bite. It was, actually, pretty good. It was juicy and flavorful. It was edible. I felt a ridiculous surge of pride. I had cooked a real meal. That small success was all the motivation I needed. It gave me the confidence to try again the following week. My next dish was a vegetable soup. The week after that, I tried making homemade pizza dough. Some weeks were more successful than others. I had my fair share of kitchen disasters. To have your fair share of something means to have a lot or more than enough of it. I had my fair share of burnt cookies, undercooked rice, and overly salty sauces. There was one particularly memorable incident involving a blender. I was trying to make a smoothie and I forgot to put the lid on properly. I turned it on, and a tidal wave of purple berry smoothie erupted from the blender, painting my entire kitchen, and me, in a sticky, purple mess. It was a disaster, but after the initial shock, I couldn't help but laugh. It was a lesson learned the hard way. To learn something the hard way means to learn it by experiencing a lot of difficulty or by making a lot of mistakes. Despite the occasional mishap, I stuck with my resolution. A mishap is an unlucky accident. Slowly but surely, my skills improved. I learned how to handle a knife properly. I learned how different spices work together. I learned the importance of reading the entire recipe before you start. Cooking started to feel less like a chore and more like a creative outlet. A chore is a task that you have to do but that you find boring or unpleasant. A creative outlet is an activity that allows you to express your creativity. I loved the process of taking simple, raw ingredients and transforming them into something delicious. I started to experiment, to go off script. To go off script means to deviate from the plan or the instructions. I would add a little extra garlic here, a different herb there. I was developing my own style, my own intuition in the kitchen. After a few months, I felt confident enough to host a small dinner party for a few friends. To host a party or a meal means to provide the food, drink, and entertainment for it. I was incredibly nervous, probably even more nervous than I was for my big conference presentation. Cooking for yourself is one thing, cooking for other people felt like a whole new level of pressure. I decided to keep the menu simple. I chose 3 dishes that I had practiced and felt comfortable with: the roast chicken that had been my first success, a simple salad with a homemade vinaigrette, and a chocolate cake for dessert. The day of the dinner party, my kitchen was a flurry of activity. A flurry is a sudden, brief period of activity or excitement. I was chopping, mixing, and trying to time everything perfectly so that all the dishes would be ready at the same time. It was stressful, but it was also exhilarating. Exhilarating means making you feel very happy, animated, or elated. My friends arrived, and I served the meal. We sat around the table, talking and laughing. I watched anxiously as they took their first bites. "This is delicious," Sarah said, after tasting the chicken. "You made this?" Her surprise was a huge compliment. The other friends echoed her praise. They loved the food. The dinner party was a success. We sat at that table for hours, long after the food was gone, just enjoying the conversation and the company. That evening was more than just a good meal. It was a milestone. A milestone is a significant stage or event in the development of something. It represented the culmination of months of practice, patience, and learning from my mistakes. Culmination is the highest or climactic point of something, especially as attained after a long time. Learning to cook taught me so much more than just how to follow a recipe. It taught me the value of patience. Good food can't be rushed. It taught me to be more mindful, to pay attention to the details of what I'm doing. And it taught me that it's never too late to learn a new skill. It doesn't matter if you think you're not a creative person or not good with your hands. Anyone can learn to cook. Just like anyone can learn a new language. It just takes a willingness to be a beginner, to make mistakes, and to laugh at yourself when you accidentally paint your kitchen with a berry smoothie. The joy of learning a new skill is not just in the final product, the perfect dish, or the fluent conversation. It's in the process itself. It's in the small victories, the lessons learned from failures, and the confidence that grows with every attempt. It's about discovering a new part of yourself that you didn't know existed. So, whether it's navigating a morning without coffee, a mountain without a map, a stage full of people, or a kitchen full of unfamiliar ingredients, the principle remains the same. Life is a series of small stories, and each one holds a lesson about resilience, perspective, and the quiet joy of overcoming a challenge. Your journey with the English language is no different. It is your own personal story, full of its own unique challenges and triumphs. There will be days when you feel lost, like I did on that dirt road with Alex. You'll encounter words and grammar rules that feel like a dead end. There will be times when you feel a knot in your stomach before you have to speak, just as I did before my presentation. And there will be many moments where your efforts feel clumsy and imperfect, like my first attempt at roasting a chicken. But please, remember the other side of those stories. Remember the bliss of reaching the summit, the validation of a successful presentation, and the simple pride of sharing a meal you cooked yourself. These moments of success in your language journey will come. They will come when you have a conversation where you forget you are even speaking English, when you understand a joke in a movie, or when you can write an email with confidence and clarity. The key is to embrace the entire process. Don't just focus on the destination of fluency. Find joy in the journey. Be curious. When you learn a new idiom, don't just memorize it. Try to use it. When you make a mistake, don't see it as a failure. See it as a funny anecdote you can tell later, a lesson learned the hard way. And with that, we come to the end of our time together for now. It has been a true pleasure sharing these daily life stories with you. My hope is that they have not only helped you practice your listening and learn some new vocabulary, but that they have also encouraged you to see your own life as a source of learning. The English language is not just in textbooks. It is all around you, in the songs you hear, the shows you watch, and the everyday conversations you have. Make it a part of your world. Be patient with yourself, be brave in your practice, and celebrate your small victories along the way. Remember that every day is a new page, and you are the author of your own story. Your English story is waiting to be written. Thank you for listening. Keep practicing, stay curious, and I wish you all the best on your incredible journey. Farewell for now.